Today we're going to do a step-by-step tutorial of this beautiful blanket. We're going to learn how to finger knit using jumbo chenille yarn. And the goal here is to keep decision fatigue really low. So I know if you get overwhelmed easily and you're tired of looking at 10 different yarns, which yarn do I use? How do I do my first row? How do I do the edges? We're going to keep this really simple and really break it down into just one main option, maybe a second option here or there for some things if you want to decide which way you like best. So it's this blanket with one main color and two accent stripes. It's about 45 inches by 65 inches, around there. It's stretchy, so that number can change a little. And let's see. So we have two options for yarn. I used Yarn Bee Eternal Bliss. This is usually my favorite. It's a great price. It's at Hobby Lobby only, so that can be an issue if you're not in the US. So an alternate option is Bernat Blanket Big. It has to be big. Bernat Blanket. Bernat makes a lot of blanket yarns, so if you get the wrong one, it won't be big enough. So make sure you get the Bernat Blanket Big. So let's just jump right into the tutorial and get going. All right, so let's get started. For our supplies, we will need our yarn, and scissors are the required supplies. And then optionally, we have a lighter. That's my favorite way to join the yarns together. If you don't use the lighter, you can also just tie knots, and I'll show you that as well. And then a measuring tape can be helpful. So if you have a measuring tape, that's great. Get that handy. And then for the yarns, you have one of two options. You can either use Yarn Bee Eternal Bliss, and that's available at Hobby Lobby. I'm going to be using these. I'm going to be using Yarn Bee for this tutorial. I have the spa blue color will be my main color, and my accent stripes will be in teal. And then if you don't have Yarn Bee or Hobby Lobby nearby, then Bernat Blanket Big is the other option. Make sure when you get Bernat Blanket that it's the big yarn, because Bernat makes lots of different blanket yarns. It needs to be Bernat Blanket Big. For these skeins are a little bit bigger, more yardage, so you only need 7 of these, so 5 of the main color plus 2 of the accent. Or if you're doing Yarn Bee, you'll need a total of 8 skeins, so 6 of the main color and 2 of the stripes. Okay, step 1, we need our main color. So I've got this Eternal Bliss Spa Blue color. I love this. So let's open it up. So all your projects will begin with what's called a slip knot. So let's make our slip knot. So you keep track of, over here's the tail end, and the yarn that's close to the ball is called the working yarn. So we're going to make a loop by putting the working yarn over the tail, then put this loop over the top of the working yarn, and then you'll reach in to pinch the working yarn and pull it up through the loop and then pull tight. All right, let me show you the slip knot again a little closer. Again, tail end over here, working yarn from the ball. Grab the working yarn, put it over the top of the tail end to make a loop here. Pick up that loop, put it on top of the working yarn, reach inside to pull up a new loop. And then if you pull on the tail end, you'll make this knot tighter. And then if you pull on the working yarn side, it'll make the loop smaller. You can adjust the size. So we want this loop, we're gonna make this loop about 3 finger size. So you can tighten it down till it's about 3 fingers in there. Okay, and so that's our slip knot. Now the next step is to make a foundation chain. And the foundation chain creates the bottom edge of the blanket. So, okay, so let's get our yarn kind of laid out flat here. So let's put our loop on top of the working yarn, pinch up a new loop, measure it to be about, we're actually going to make these even bigger. Let's make these closer to 3.5 to 4 fingers, and then lay it back down, pinch, pull up, measure it, lay it down flat. So we kind of pinch, pull up, lay it flat, pinch, pull up, lay it flat. So we just keep doing this to create our chain. When we pick up this loop, some people twist it this way, some twist it that way. I like to go clockwise, so it just kind of does a little half turn to lay flat, twist, okay. And then to count our chains so we know how much we've made, I count the top edges. So count here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, plus this one makes 9. So I've done 9 so far. We're going to keep going until our chain has 30 loops. So we will make a foundation chain of 30. Real quick, I wanted to show you, so when we're making this foundation chain, what we're making is the bottom edge of the blanket. And the way I'm showing you is going to make this really pretty braided effect on the bottom edge. And so it's important when we make these loops down here, when we make them, you know, like I said, 3.5 fingers, and that's bigger than what we'll be doing the rest of the blanket. We need these loops on the bottom to be nice and stretchy. Otherwise, this bottom edge will be really tight and the rest of the blanket will stretch. All right, I counted all my loops and I now have 30 loops in my chain. So next what we're going to do is start our first row. And this first one is a little trickier than the rest, but we can do it. So let's see. So we just finished our chain. Now we're going to flip it down on its face like this. I'll do that for the whole thing here. Okay. And if you look really closely on the back side here, there's these little bumps in the middle of each chain. And we're going to work new loops up under those bumps. So I've had some people, when they're looking at the front, sometimes if you look closely, you can kind of see it maybe looks like there's bumps on the front, but those bumps are vertical. Those aren't what we want. And if you pull a little tight, those kind of disappear. If you put it down on its face and we're looking at the back side, you'll see the bumps are more horizontal. So those are the bumps we want, the ones on the back. So let's get a little more yarn out. Okay, so here's our last loop. Here's the first bump. We'll kind of work our finger underneath it, and then we can pull up a new loop like that. Okay, and we'll go to the next bump. Put your finger under, pull up a new loop. I kind of straighten them out each time. I try to make it so that the chain is always flat on the surface you're working on and the loops are pointing up. That kind of helps me keep everything organized. Otherwise it can be easy for this chain to start to get twisted and then you lose track of where the bumps are. So let's kind of keep it flat, work up under these loops. Okay, so we're working our way back from right to left. So these ones are going to be a little bit smaller. These loops will be more like 1.5 to 2. These are a little, maybe even tight. So yeah, 1.5 I'd say. The rest of the blanket we want to keep loops a little smaller. After you finish the blanket and you use it a little bit, it will stretch out. That's just kind of what happens with this yarn. So if we make it just a little on the tighter side, then it won't stretch out as much. So we're just working our way back, making all these loops under every bump. Make sure you don't miss any. Straighten it out as you go. All right, last few here. Okay, that one. And then make sure you don't miss this last one on the end. Okay, so now at this point, it's really important to stop and count all your loops. Make sure you still have the 30 that we started with. That way we make sure we didn't miss any along the way. So let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 27, 28, 29. One on the end counts as 30. All right, so that's our first row. Now we get to start the second row. So a tip is always move your ball of yarn over to the direction that you're moving. So we just finished going this way. Now we're gonna go back right. So move your ball back to the right. You kind of have your yarn leading the way you're gonna go. All right, and so now we have the chain kind of flat on the surface, right? Now we can actually flip it up. So you can see that chain as it stretches out, it'll make more of that braided look. Okay, so going back the other way, the trick for having nice pretty braided edge on the sides is to actually skip the first loop of every row. So when we go back this way, we won't do the first one. We put the yarn behind and we'll start with the second loop here. So we reach in, hook that yarn and pull up a new loop. Okay, and these loops, like I said, it's gonna be about 1.5 fingers, so you can get 2 in there. It's kind of snug, but you can get 2 fingers. It's not an exact science, it's just, you'll kind of learn and get the feel of it with practice. Okay, and then get the next one. My technique, I usually like to put my pointer in there, hook it, and then use my thumb to make it just a little bigger. And that will make it about the right size each time. So the way we control how tight our blanket is the size of these loops, as well as how much gap is in the back with this yarn when we bridge between loops. So if you have your loops really far apart, see like that, and you leave a big gap in the back, that's gonna leave big holes in your blanket. So you don't want that. So keep it close when you put that next one in there. But also too tight can be bad as well and cause your blanket to kind of pucker and change shape as you go. So it's not an exact science, but you'll learn to kind of be consistent is the key. So just work on keeping your tension or your tightness consistent here with the size of your loops, as well as the distance between your loops. So we're working back from right to left, from left to right. Okay, we're just hooking a new loop into the old loops. Another thing to look for, especially this first row, is sometimes they twist. If they get twisted, then your loops will look funny. So to check, you can kind of pull at each loop kind of has like a leg, a left and a right leg. And if they're not twisted, you'll see that they're separate like this. When they're twisted, you can see that one leg crosses over the other. So untwist, so you can see both legs of the loop. Now you know it's untwisted, and you can reach in and pull up the next loop. All right, so check the next one, not twisted, hook your next loop, and just keep working our way back. Okay, now we've got this last one on the end, so it's kind of still laying flat, so you can kind of meet it at the side to bring it back up facing the same way as the other loops and scoop up that next loop. Okay, and because the side ones we only knit when we finish a row, not when we start, we'll make these ones on the end a little bit bigger because they have to work over 2 rows rather than 1. Okay, and now we're coming back the other way, so move the ball to the other side. Okay, we already just knit this one, so that's why we're gonna not do it again. We'll start with this second loop here, and now we work our way back the other direction. So usually when I'm working to the left, I use my right hand to hook the new loops, and when I'm going the other way, I use my left hand. So that's just my technique, but you can find whatever works for you to get these new loops created. All right, finishing up this third row here, and that's when we pick up this one. It's down low. Make sure, because it will start to kind of curl over the side this way. So you can kind of meet it at the side, bring it back to being straight, and then hook the next loop. Okay, make that one just a little bigger, and then go back the other way. And so that's the gist of the blanket for the rest of the way. We just work our way back and forth, and then at some point we will need to add a new skein when we finish this up. So let's work our way back and forth until we finish this whole skein. And when I get closer, I will show you how to check if you have enough yarn to finish that row or if you need to change the color. All right, I'm starting to get kind of low on my yarn here. So one way to check to see if you'll have enough to finish the next row of your blanket is to kind of lay out the yarn in the full width of the blanket here. So kind of lay it flat, stretch it out from end to end. So from down here, and then run it back the other way. And you can do that a couple times to measure how many lengths of yarn or blanket widths of yarn you have left. So here I have, looks like I have about a little over 3.5 lengths here. And that, usually you're gonna need somewhere between 2 and 3 blanket widths of yarn left to be able to finish the next row. So if you have 3, that should be enough. 2 might be too short. So I definitely have enough here to finish the next row. Worst case, you start working up the next row and you run short. All you have to do is rip it, undo each stitch, and then redo it, or change the color and then keep going. So if you ever need to pull things out, there's nothing wrong with having to undo it, right? So if you need to undo your blanket at some point, you can always do that and redo it. So now let me do this last row with this color, and then I will show you how to change color. So we're doing 1 skein of this main color, and then we'll do 1 skein of our stripe. All right, so I was able to finish that row, and now I don't have enough for another row. So now we can go ahead and start the next color. So now I'm going to start my teal. Find the end, got some fluff. All right, so for changing color, so the trick with changing the color is actually to not finish the whole row. We'll stop 1 loop short. So here we go. We're going to end this color here, and we'll start the new color before we do the last stitch here. So I'm going to show you the lighter method. So we're going to need a lighter and some scissors. So the place where you're going to cut your yarn, kind of look at the back side here, and we're going to cut here just behind this other loop. So you'll cut pretty close to it, maybe 1/2 inch there. Okay, and then we'll actually just pull it out so that we have a little slack to work with here. And what we're gonna do, okay, so we're gonna make sure we have very, very clean edges here. So I like to kind of, I don't want to cut up any more length, but I want to get all the fluff off the tip here so that we're exposing what's inside is a metal, it's a plastic core. So the center of all of this yarn has a plastic core running through all of it, and the fluff is attached to the plastic. So we need to kind of feel in the center there's a tough plastic bit. So I can feel that. So it means I've got enough fluff off of it. If you need to, you can even trim around the edges a little bit just to make sure you can expose that. And then with the new one, I also want to cut off a little bit here too. You can trim some fluff on the edges if you want, just to get a little bit of the core exposed. Okay, so let's hold these close together. And what we're going to do, we want to melt the core on both sides and then fuse the cores together. We don't want to burn all the fluff. That's not the goal. The goal is just to melt the plastic core. If you burn all the fluff, it gets crispy and crunchy and doesn't smell good. We're just trying to melt the middle. So let's go ahead and light. You'll have to hold it for a few seconds. You can see it melt a little bit. It might light on fire a little. You can blow it out if you need to. And then fuse those cores together. Wait a second or two until it's cool enough to actually kind of pinch. And then you can start to pinch the cores together. You'll feel them inside, and then kind of roll it in your fingers. And you can feel where the cores meet. It's thicker right there than it is the rest of the yarn. So So wait a few seconds while it starts to cool to get hard again, and then give it a good test. Make sure it's attached. If this comes apart, trim the ends again and fuse again. So you'll, if this rips apart, just trim for another clean edge and try again. And then now we can continue knitting. So we've got enough of the spa blue to do our last or second to last stitch here. So just line it up, don't pull it up too far, just make sure it's lined up for that stitch. And then the next stitch, this one on the end, remember it's curling this way, so meet it on the side, pull it back straight, okay, and then pull up that loop. There we go. So now this is technically the last stitch of this row, but it's going to line up more closely with the next row. So now we can go back this way, start knitting to the left again. That's how we do a color change. We always do it on the edges just before the last stitch. And here, let me show you. So here's that braid on the bottom. It curls up to the edge. So not that pretty braid on the sides too. So the edges are looking great, and that's what happens when we skip the first loop of every row. And so, it's possible if sometimes there's some variation in skein length and maybe in technique and how tight you're making your loops. So if it's possible that maybe you finished your row over on this side instead of this side, and you may need to change the color over here. So it doesn't matter which side you change the color on, the rule is the same. This blanket, we're just trying to keep it simple and keep it, whole skeins instead of counting rows or measuring or anything complicated. So this is just to keep things simple, just going by the skein. So if you have to change your color on the other side, that's totally fine. And we'll just keep going. Now let's go until we finish up this whole skein of this new color, and then we'll switch back to the main color after that. Ooh, look at that. Just a tiny bit left. I think that should be just enough for me to finish off. If I was going to fuse with a lighter, this would definitely be enough, but I want to show you how to actually tie the yarns together if you want to go that route. All right, let's see. So we're going to change back to the main color. You get to find the end. Okay, so same thing as before. We stopped just before the last stitch. And now I'm going to put the tail end in the back and get the working yarn coming forward this way, and go ahead and just pick up a loop here in that last one. Okay, we're just basically just going to start using the new color. All right, and so then we go back this way. I'm just going to do a few stitches, and then I'm going to roll it forward, and now we're going to tie these ends together in the back. So I could tie a knot beforehand, but by kind of just starting knitting right away with the new color, now I know that the knot's going to end up on the back of the work rather than in the middle of a loop on the front. So let me show you that again. I think I might have sped through that a little bit. So let's see. So we just finished off with our stripe color, and then the last loop of this row is here. So we're just going to start knitting with the new color. Pull up that loop, and then hold the tails in the back, hiding behind the blanket. There you go. And then start working this way as usual. It'll feel a little bit loose here because we haven't anchored it with a knot yet. Okay, so we'll just get a few stitches done just to kind of get this yarn anchored in place. Get this kind of the size you want, the edge loop. Flip it down so you can see the back. Here's our two tails, and we're going to just tie a double knot. kind of try to get the tension, firm, but don't pull so tight that you start to shorten this loop here. Okay, so there's a single knot, and let's do a double knot. Okay, and try to get those pretty snug, get that second knot snug without pulling on the loops. Okay, there we go. And then you can kind of maneuver it around to get those loops even again. Okay, and then what we're going to do, we'll end up just hiding these tails by weaving them in to the blanket. There's no, right or wrong way to do this. We're just trying to kind of follow some of the previous stitches and just kind of go in the same direction so you don't really see it. Just kind of tuck it in. So this method, isn't as pretty. It's going to maybe make things a little bit thicker in this area, and it's probably going to pop out here and there every now and then. You'll have to tuck it back in. But if you don't have a lighter handy, it totally works. Or if you're doing this craft with kids and you don't want to be playing with fire, then this is an alternate option. I haven't really knit much with this color yet, but after I've got a few rows of this color, then I can tuck this tail in up here. So you want to, weave it in with the matching color. So I can't really do much with this tail yet, but I'll do that later. And we'll continue on. So now that we've switched back to the main color, what we're going to do is 4 whole skeins of this main color. Unless you're doing your blanket with Bernat, if you're going to be doing a Bernat blanket, then after you do, first main color, first accent stripe, and then back to the main color, the middle section is only going to be 3 if you're doing Bernat Blanket Big, and it'll be 4 if you're doing Yarn Bee Eternal Bliss. So that's the only difference between the 2 blankets. All right, so let's continue on. So some pointers for when I'm making my loops to keep them more even. So if I'm going to the left, I've got my right hand picking up the loops. What I'll do is I kind of anchor my fingers here so that when I pull up this loop, I'm pulling from the working yarn, right? When I pull it up, I'm not pulling to make the neighboring loop smaller, right? We don't want to pull from that way. I want to anchor here so that when we pull it up, we're pulling from over here. So that way we're not disturbing the loop we just made previously. So I kind of anchor, scoop, and then thumb picks it up to make it bigger. I also am holding this loop down with my left hand. So I can show you again. So I'm kind of anchoring here, get the finger in, hold it with the left hand. You do what you got to do to get this loop hooked, then hold here, pick it up. So that's kind of my method for picking up my loops and keeping them consistent. And when I'm going the other direction, it's just all reversed. So I can show you that with my other hands going the other way. This is just my method. There's many ways to do this. We're just trying to create loops that are as uniform as possible, but perfection is not necessary here. This yarn is very fluffy and hides perfections. So right now our goal is to just finish our first blanket. That's our only goal. Just get the practice and finish it. Okay, again on the end, this loop has turned this way, so meet it on the side, pull it up, hook. Okay, going back the other way. Okay, and another pointer, another tip is you'll notice sometimes your tension can change while you're knitting, so the blanket may start to flare out if your tension gets looser, or it may taper in if you're getting tighter. So sometimes it's a good idea, if you want, to have your measuring tape and just lay it out the width of the blanket so you can kind of measure how wide you are each round, and just to see if it's starting to change. It'll keep you on track. If you notice you need to change how tight you're making your loops, you can do that before the blanket is done. So just keep track of how wide your blanket is. right now mine's about 42 inches, but this will start to stretch over time. So it'll probably end up being a little bigger after we use it a little bit, but it's good. It's got some stretch. Okay, let's keep going. Yeah, let me show you going the other way, my technique. So again, get the yarn over here because that's the direction we're going. Get my finger in there, can hook it while also holding it down with the other hand. So pointer hooks the yarn, thumb brings it up a little bigger, hook and then a little bigger, while anchoring this loop with my other hand. So that's what it looks like going the other way. Same thing, just opposite hands. Okay, now I've done a few rows of this color. I'm going to hide the tail. I could also do it at the very end of the blanket if I wanted, but I might as well do it while I'm here now. So I can just, again, there's no exact way to do this. We're just trying to hide this tail by kind of following previous stitches. I'll just show you one example. Just tucking it in to the matching color so it won't be super visible on the front. Kind of wrapping it around here. Okay. And that'll make it hidden. And if you know, if the tail's still sticking out, we can trim this a little bit. It'll probably come untucked at some point after use, so just keep retucking it in, or learn the lighter method if you want that perfect join. But this works too. All right, let's continue on. All right, so I'm getting to the end of this skein here. So I did one, another one. Now I'm joining the same color. So when you join the same color, you can, if you're using the lighter method, you can just do it in the middle of the row. It doesn't have to be on the end of the blanket. If you were tying the ends together, like I previously showed you, I would want to do that on the edge, just so that you don't have a knot in the middle of your blanket. So, but I'm doing the lighter method, so I can do that right here in the middle of the row. So like usual, trim the ends. And let's fuse them together. Test it out. All right, so I can just keep on knitting. All right, I finished the 4 skeins of this spa blue color. So it was one skein, and then 4 for this middle section. And now, so I did the 4 skeins. Now I'm going to do this other contrast stripe. And so let's change the color again. I can show you how to do it on this side. It's same idea as what we did on the right. All right, so trim close to this loop here, but leave a little bit of space. Open this sucker up. All right, find the end, trim the end, try to get a clean cut so there's no extra fluff. Okay, and then this one, just pull it out so we have some slack to work with. And let's melt the cores. Pinch them together, roll it, and give it a test. All right, nice and strong. All right, then let's continue on with the next stripe here. So again, let's do that stitch with the spa blue color, and then we're switching colors now. So remember, this edge stitch likes to curl over, so we grab it here, pull it forward, then hook up that stitch here. All right, and then start going back the other way. So let's finish up this skein to make this next stripe, and then after we do this stripe again, we will switch back to the main color for one more skein of the main color, and then I can show you how we will bind off that very last row. I wanted to give you a quick tip as you're working with your blanket and it starts to get really long. It can kind of get cumbersome and hard to reach the loops you're working on. So one way to make that a little easier is to kind of roll the blanket up. So you kind of have this big log here, and then you can, sit at your table and reach over it to do your knitting on the open loops here. So that's usually what I like to do to kind of keep the blanket under control as it gets really long. All right, so I've made it to the end here. Got my last stripe and my last skein. Let me roll it up again. All right, so now what we need to do is close off these loops, and when we do that, this last row where we close these off is called the bind off row. And so for this one, we're going to be making our loops bigger than we've been making them. So we're going to be needing more yarn to finish this last row. So you need to make sure that you've saved yourself 4 widths of the blanket. So if you lay out your remaining yarn to the width of the blanket and see how many widths you have. So let's see, I've got just a little bit more than 4. I've got a little bit, this much more than 4. So that should be just enough because I'm going to be making larger loops, so we'll use up the yarn faster. So like when we were, the number of widths we need during the blanket with these small loops is between 2 and 3, but this last row we're going to need 4 widths of the blanket. So let me show you how this works. This blanket's getting big. Okay. All right, so I'm on this side. You can do this from either side. It doesn't matter which side you start on. Okay, but I finished on the right side here. Okay, so we will start by, like we're knitting the other way, but we'll just do 1 for now, and we're going to make it bigger than usual. We're going to make it about 4 fingers, a tight 4, so maybe like 3.5 to 4. So like a tight 4, and then we put that loop inside the edge loop. Okay, now we knit the next one. Again, make it bigger, like a 3.5 size. Put that loop inside the previous one. Kind of pull it tight. Okay, do the next one. Again, make it bigger, 3.5 fingers. Make sure this one isn't twisting. Try to keep it straight. Put it inside. Pull it tight. All right, and we just continue that way all the way across. So another way to do it, the same exact result, is to just kind of overlap the loops here. Put this loop down here and then pull the yarn through both of them. So you can also do it that way. Pull them up that way and then overlap here. Same effect. So you can pick which way you like better. So overlap, pull the yarn through both of them, through 2 loops. Again, make sure this loop is big enough to reach the next one. And as you go, it's important to kind of check the stretchiness of this edge. If these loops are too small, you're gonna have a really tight, restrictive edge, and it won't look nice with the rest of the stretchy blanket. So you can kind of test it as you go and see, is it stretching about the same as much? It's about the same amount as the rest of the blanket. If you're noticing that it's too tight and restrictive, you can make these loops a little bit bigger, but you can also, it is possible to make them too big and it'll get kind of, it'll be too puffy and loose up here and won't look right with the rest of the blanket. So kind of gauge as you go, see if you're liking how it stretches with the rest of the blanket and test it out. You can always back up a stitch or two if you need to make an adjustment. So we're just interlocking these loops to create that same kind of braided edge look that we have on the rest of the blanket. So pick which way you like. If you like to overlap the loops, you can do that way, or you can just pull them up one at a time and stick it inside. Okay, let's continue doing that all the way across. All right, finishing up the last few loops here. Okay, here's the last one. Don't forget that one on the end. Pull up that last loop, put it inside here. And then actually for this last one, what I like to do is just pull it through. Okay, and let's tighten that last one up a little bit. Okay, and look at that, we have our blanket. So the only thing that's left is to tie off our loose ends. Here's this end plus the one at the beginning. And if you did any knots to join your yarn along the way, you can hide your loose ends now. Let me show you my favorite way to hide these last ends here. So I've got a little more than I need, so I'm just going to trim it a little shorter so it's easier to work with. So one option, of course, is to just tie a knot and then weave in the end. What I like to do is actually fuse it with the lighter again. Okay, so what I like to do is just tuck it around here. And then I'm going to trim it again. And I'm going to actually fuse this into the side of another skein. So it's a little harder to fuse to the side than it is to the ends, like end to end, because you have the cores exposed. So if you're going to fuse into the side, you got to kind of dig through and see if you can find the core. Because otherwise it won't be a very, if you're just burning, melting fluff to fluff, it's not a very good join. You need to get that core connected. All right, so I'm going to try to spread it so I can see the core. I'm only going to be able to light one end. Oh, where'd it go? Okay, let's see if I can get it to stick in there. Okay, that didn't work. Let's try again. Okay, I lost the edge of that one I had found. Let's see. Use it to this one. Okay, I'm gonna try again. I'm gonna not lose my edge. Okay, so I'm gonna trim the crispy ends off and try again. Okay, I think it's good to see mistakes sometimes so you can learn from them. Okay, let's see. Okay, I think I found the core. It's hard to keep it parted long enough to get it fused. Okay, let's try again. Try not to fuse it to my finger. There we go. Okay. This can get hot, so just be careful. Try to get the end of this one fused to the side of the other strand. Okay, I think it feels like it's connected. Okay, pinch. All right, give it a test. Yeah, that feels good. All right, so there we go. Fluff it up a little bit. There's our corner. All right, now let's go back to the beginning, the little slip knot at the other end. Here we are. Okay. So here's from this first foundation chain all the way on this beginning end. Okay, the way I like to hide this tail is to look at the side chain over here. We're going to kind of loop into one of them. Let's see. So I like to loop. So here's the first one. So we're going to loop up here, around and back down, and I'm going to thread this back through. This is the actual knot from the slip knot. I'm going to actually go inside that knot and pull it through again. So it's helpful if when you make that first knot to not over tighten it. How many times did I just say knot? Okay, so if you kind of get that lined up nicely, then it kind of blends in with the rest of the chain on the side there. Okay, and then your option is to tie it off and weave in the end, or we can fuse it again. Same deal as before. So I'm going to fuse it in here and see. I think, yeah, I'll fuse it to this spot. Let me shorten it a little bit so it's not super long end. Maybe trim a little more of the fluff. Okay, get a clean cut. Okay, and let's find where I'm going to fuse it. Hard part is getting such a short end to curve around there. Let's see. Okay, got the core ready. Okay, pinch it in. Okay, give it a test. All right, feels pretty strong. And if you need to, yeah, just kind of shuffle things around until it looks straightened out and pretty. Okay, that end's always going to look just a little different because it's a slip knot down there. Okay, there we go. All right, good work. All right, blanket's all done. Good work. I hope you had a lot of fun with that. Here it is with the Yarn Bee yarn. And I also made one with the Bernat, so you could see that as well. They are pretty much the same. Bernat, the stripes are just a little bit thicker because the yarn ball is a little longer. Otherwise, it's same idea. I hope you found that to be fun and approachable and doable, and hopefully I sparked a new hobby in you. If you want to follow along for more patterns and tutorials, I'd love to have you here.